this ordinance committee meeting of March 17th. May we have a roll call, please?
Committee Member Snedden,
Here.
Committee Member Jordan.
Here.
And Chair Gutierrez.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda, Chair.
Any general public comment?
No general public comment.
Okay. May we have the staff report, please?
Good morning, Chair Gutierrez and committee members. I'm Ted Hamilton-Roll, Design Review Supervisor. Joining me is City Planner Ellen Kokinda and Planning Analyst Brenda Beltz. We're here on the Planning Commission's recommendation for you to consider the ordinance amendments associated with the single-family streamlining project. As you may recall, this project was initiated in 2022 as a result of community feedback and land development team oversight subcommittee direction. More recently, we presented a briefing at the full City Council in June of 2025. Council supported the direction of the proposed amendments, and this is the project's first time in front of Ordinance Committee. As a recap, this project implements much-needed changes to the city's design review process for single-family development, streamlining and simplifying what is currently an overburdened process. This project has been in progress for more than 3 years and has been thoroughly vetted by the public, the SFDB, the Planning Commission, and City Council. In early 2023, staff analyzed 3 years' worth of SFDB project data, did public outreach focused on SFDB stakeholders, including homeowners, architects, designers, planning consultants, American Institute of Architects advocates, and current and former SFDB members. In 2024, based on this targeted outreach, staff began developing the ordinance and guidelines updates and presented those concepts to the Single Family Design Board and Planning Commission. In 2025, we held additional SFDB and PC discussions, did additional outreach to neighbors and the Realtors Association, and held the briefing session on the proposed amendments to City Council. We held an introductory discussion with Planning Commission in 2025, December, and on January 8th of this year, Planning Commission recommended the amendments be forwarded to City Council. And before I go any further, I just wanted to ask the chair, this presentation takes about 20 minutes. I was wondering if I could add another 5 minutes to the 15.
Sounds good.
Thank you. All right, so for today's Ordinance Committee hearing, we will provide an overview of the proposed amendments, open public comment, then take initial questions and comments from the committee. We are requesting a recommendation to forward the amendments package to City Council for adoption. The project goals are the same as presented to City Council in June 2025. 1, to reduce the number of single-family projects subject to design review. 2, to streamline the public hearing process for single-family projects. And 3, to create more flexibility to address common homeowner interests. Key project actions include updating the SFDB code and guidelines and incorporating complementary amendments to the zoning ordinance to ease up on restrictions and give homeowners more flexibility. I'll now walk you through how we're addressing each of those goals through our amendments. First goal is to reduce the number of projects subject to design review. The primary change we're proposing here is to exempt alterations from design review if they don't result in new floor area and either visually match the existing development or result in a new cohesive design. Site improvements would also be exempt if they involve less than 50 cubic yards of grading. And here's an example of how we'd apply this new approach and what we mean by exempting alterations from design review. In the SFDB approved project shown here, the existing house is in the top image. The house needed a new roof, windows, and plaster, just an exterior renovation. Under the current code, the project required consent review due to the number and extent of the changes proposed. However, under the proposed code, this project would not require a public hearing since it only involves exterior alterations, and the resulting design seen in the bottom image here is cohesive and consistent with the SFDB guidelines. Along with reducing design review triggers, we propose to increase administrative approvals of minor projects, part of a comprehensive update to the SFDB guidelines. Although it's not in the Ordinance Committee's purview, the SFDB guidelines updates are proposed for council adoption, so I'll give you a brief overview of what to expect. We are doing a general reorganization and reformat to enhance the readability of the guidelines, simplifying and consolidating the long list of SFDB goals, and enhanced process guidance, including the addition of substantial conformance criteria. And to help streamline the process, we also plan to expand the guidelines criteria for administrative staff level approvals of minor projects. Here's an example of the type of project that would qualify for administrative approval under the new code. On this slide, you see this red hatched addition to the rear of the house. The street is here, kind of at the lower right corner of the image. So this is a rear addition, really can't be seen from the street. This addition required consent review because it was over the 500 square foot size limit allowed for administrative approvals. By allowing admin approval of up to 800 square feet for additions on the first story, we are allowing more flexibility for projects that are obviously consistent with the SFDB guidelines. They don't alter the front facade, they are a cohesive design style, and that they're located in consideration of the neighbors. This would allow streamlined permits for projects like adding a bedroom addition at the rear of a house. And for comparison, here's an example of an addition that would not be eligible for admin approval with the new standards. Even though the addition shown here is small and one story and meets most of the criteria, it does not meet one of the criteria, which is that additions can't significantly alter the front facade. This red hatched addition kind of disrupts the symmetry of the house and results in massing in the front, which SFDB let us know is not necessarily acceptable. It's important to keep in mind that just because we receive an administrative approval request, we don't have to approve it administratively. We can refer it to consent or full board, and staff regularly does so if they don't meet the criteria. If these streamlining amendments are adopted, we anticipate at least a 24% reduction in SFDB projects, and this is a conservative preliminary estimate of the total number of projects that would be reduced, the bare minimum we can expect to be eliminated. The actual reduction in projects may be higher. Note that there is little change to the share of projects reviewed at full board. That's the green slice of the pie here between current and proposed. And this demonstrates that we're not proposing changes that would remove the most significant projects like new two-story houses from SFDB purview. Looking at this another way, in terms of the actual number of projects per year, we have 221 projects triggered per year for SFDB review, and 1/4 of those projects would be entirely exempt from SFDB review. Consent and full board SFDB projects take an average of 2 public hearings, so if we multiply the number of consent and full board projects by 2, which is 54, we get 108 fewer agenda items per year. This is a big savings. We think this is a reasonable reduction for now, as we wanted this project to take a measured approach so that proposed ordinance will strike a balance between streamlining and maintaining reasonable aesthetic oversight of single-family projects. Goal 2 is to streamline the public hearing process by consolidating the SFDB review from 2 approval hearings into 1, changing the requirements for a mailed notice and lowering the review level for floor area modifications. By doing so, we are implementing a NOVAC report recommendation to reduce the number of appeal points, shining a light on project design approval as the most important approval, and by eliminating a hearing, helping the city comply with the 5 hearing limit for housing projects set by the Housing Crisis Act. Also, most jurisdictions only have 1 approval step and 1 appeal point, which we think is sufficient for single-family projects. The current process requires public hearings for both project design approval and final approval. Project design approval, which is in the middle here, is the main approval and the one that counts for state permit streamlining purposes. Final approval, despite its name that implies otherwise, is not the substantive SFDB approval. Instead, it's only the approval of final project details and the verification that those details substantially conform to the project design approval. Currently, both project design approval and final approval are appealable by anyone with standing, even though final approval scope is narrow, only limited to color and material details and whether the project conforms to project design approval. The proposed process front loads the review of design details to project design approval and defers the review for substantial conformance to the building permit plan check phase, performed by staff. If staff find that the building permit plans do not substantially conform to project design approval or are otherwise uncomfortable making a decision, we have the option to refer final approval to the SFDB. Final approval decisions made at SFDB would only be appealable by the project applicant. To help staff with making these post-approval decisions, we are introducing a process for determining substantial conformance to approved plans in the SFDB guidelines. This is a lot of text on one slide. You don't have to read it all right now. We can come back to it. But just know that there are 7 criteria for substantial conformance that need to be met. Minor variations to plans may be approved if they meet these criteria, and if they do not, then a revised project design approval is required. This makes it much more clear to everyone what to do when a plan set deviates from what SFDB approved and was something that SFDB project appellants and neighborhood representatives requested. Along with streamlining the final approval process, staff proposed updated findings for SFDB project design approval. We've reduced the number of findings from 7 to 5, shortened the text, and reworded them to keep their original intent while also focusing them on SFDB's purview of size, house design, and aesthetics. This is something the SFDB has requested and will help with the clarity of their motions. We also propose cleanups to the hillside finding and grading and vegetation removal finding that focus SFDB's review on project's aesthetics and reduce the amount of text for them to read. Another streamlining code amendment is to update the mailed notice triggers for all design review boards. The biggest changes are 2 additions. Currently, a 500 square foot first story addition, outlined in red there, requires a mailed notice, and we are proposing to increase that threshold to 800 square feet. This aligns with state ADU law that allows ministerial approval of an 800 square foot ADU. And similarly, with second story additions, down below, we are proposing to increase the notice threshold from 150 square feet to 250. And this is for existing additions to existing second or higher stories. So not a new second story, just an addition to an existing. This allows staff to administratively approve a small bedroom addition on the existing second story or a bathroom, something that the current code and guidelines doesn't allow. We also propose to change the eligibility requirements to appeal HLC and ABR final approvals. As with final approval decisions made by the SFDB, the proposed amendments would make ABR and HLC final approval appealable only by the project applicant. Again, this facilitates the city's compliance with the Housing Crisis Act 5-hearing limit for housing projects. Lastly, for design review ordinance amendments is a widely supported streamlining action. Currently, the process to approve or deny a single-family project exceeding the allowable floor area ratio, also known as an FAR modification, is done in 3 steps. First, a required concept review at design review. Second, the formal decision on the modification at Planning Commission. And third, back to design review for project design approval and final approval. The proposed process combines these 3 steps into one, making the design review body the decision maker, which stakeholders indicated was preferable as the FAR findings have more to do with aesthetics than with land use. Our third goal is to implement zoning amendments that help streamline home improvement projects and address common homeowner interests. Our primary approach is to reduce the number of automatic design review triggers and create design standards from existing design guidelines. Applicants can either design to these standards or be exempt from discretionary review or request an exception reviewed at SFDB. This allows the community to maintain aesthetic oversight even with state mandates to reduce design review. One such guideline turned standard is that upper story decks should be 15 feet away from the property line. For fences and site walls, the maximum height is per the zoning code, and the code now specifies allowed materials including wood, black or green painted metal, masonry, or stucco. Disallowed materials include chicken wire, vinyl, unfinished CMU block, and chain link. These materials are based on those listed in the SFDB guidelines, and exceptions to these new standards can be requested at design review. To address privacy concerns voiced by members of the public, we propose to add standards for upper story windows within 15 feet of an interior lot line. They can either use a minimum sill height of 42 inches or be oriented toward the front or the rear. This prevents large floor-to-ceiling openings looking directly at neighbors, and this is yet another example of an existing guideline that's turning into a standard. The single-family residence design guidelines encourage upper story openings to be placed at the front facade, like in the image shown on the slide. Initially, we had planned to exempt all minor zoning exceptions from SFDB review. However, we recognize that overheight fences, walls, and hedges, as shown in this image, can significantly affect the streetscape and shared property lines between neighbors. Therefore, we're keeping the process the same for them with a public hearing and mailed notice. We're proposing a new process for the more commonly rubber-stamped MZEs, including a building height increases in the setback, trash enclosures in the front yard, and new and expanded openings and setbacks. Those would now be reviewed ministerially using code standards based on existing findings. We're proposing minor changes to height regulations for fences and hedges, illustrated here in the red text. For front yard fences, we're decreasing the max height allowed from 8 feet to 5 feet, but you can still request an MZE to allow up to 12 feet. This might seem more strict at first glance, but this allowed us to eliminate the design review trigger for front yard fences over 3.5 feet tall. So instead of this automatic trigger for fences that are just over 3.5 feet tall, we're allowing a 5-foot tall fence by right in the front yard as long as it meets these objective design standards and material specs aligning with the guidelines. I'm competing with some kind of construction going on.
Yeah, they're redoing the IT offices downstairs. It's a contractor, sorry.
Let me know if you want me to repeat anything. These next few concepts for inland zoning won't apply in the coastal zone, and they're aimed at providing homeowners more flexibility in how they develop their property. The main change we're proposing is to remove the requirement that parking spaces for single-family residences, duplexes, and condos would have to be covered. This gives property owners building a new house the option to not build a garage, potentially lowering project cost and reducing project size in bulk. Note, we're not proposing to change the number of required parking spaces, only the stipulation that they must be covered. This provides significant relief from regulations. The current zoning code often forces people into a path they don't necessarily want to take just to get an approval. The new regulations provide common sense options. This particularly benefits folks with non-conforming one-car garages who want to add another parking space. Currently, if someone with a non-conforming garage, like this one highlighted back here, if they want to get a permit to alter it, they have to make it fully conforming to current code, which can be quite costly and is sometimes infeasible due to site constraints. And in some cases, insurance companies require homeowners to demolish substandard garages in order to keep their insurance policy. The proposed code would allow these folks to get a permit to demolish their non-conforming garage and replace it with uncovered parking spaces, saving time and money and potentially preventing them from losing their home insurance. These process improvements also allow more options for folks who want to use their garage for something other than parking but don't want to convert it to a full-fledged ADU with a full bathroom and kitchen. Currently, the code allows your garage to be either a garage on the left or an accessory dwelling unit on the right, with no flexibility to permit it as a garage, playroom, or workshop, or with no flexibility to permit it as a workshop, playroom, or storage, excuse me. By removing the covered parking requirement, the proposed amendments would give people options to convert their garage to a storage or playroom, a guest room, or keep it as is for parking. Essentially, this gives people the flexibility to convert their garage into something that better meets their needs. Along with allowing the flexibility to build or not build a garage, the proposed ordinance would allow the construction of a guest house that can be used only by the occupants of the main residence, their non-paying guest, or domestic employees. This gives people more flexibility to build a space with a bedroom and full bath for their guests to visit without the expense of adding a kitchen. Again, this is something current zoning does not allow. Initially, we proposed that detached new construction guest houses could be up to 500 square feet, but at their December 2025 hearing, the Planning Commission directed us to increase the size limit to allow more living space. In January, we proposed and they accepted a 650 square foot cap. And to give more context, we felt that a cap on the size for new detached guest houses would be needed so that these guest houses wouldn't take away from the existing incentives to build an 800 square foot ADU. We also propose easier to meet open yard requirements. There are many lots in the city between 5,000 and 6,000 square feet, and they often have a hard time meeting the required 1,250 square feet of open yard when planning an addition or accessory building. To address this, we propose to update the zoning code to require, to reduce the open yard requirement to 800 square feet for lots 6,000 square feet and smaller. We also propose to change the minimum dimensions from 20 by 20 feet to 20 by 15 feet. This will make it far easier for folks with smaller lots to meet the open yard requirements while still providing ample open space. And you can see in the slide, it's not to scale, but roughly 1,250 is outlined in red and 800 is in blue. The proposed amendments also promote vibrant streetscapes by requiring landscape in the front setback. Currently, we have nothing in the ordinance or guidelines that prevents a front setback from being entirely covered over in asphalt. And to address this, we propose to add a requirement that at least 50% of the area in the front setback must be planted as shown in this sketch. Currently, there's not a codified process to issue building permits to address immediate threats to life and property. And because of our strict design review triggers, we are required to put projects through design review before any construction can begin. Obviously, this prevents barriers to quick remediation of hazards, and to address this, the proposed amendments add a procedure for emergency permits to allow the Community Development Director to approve temporary permits. These approvals are subject to conditions and limitations, including that the permanent work be permitted under the regular process after the immediate emergency has been addressed. Occasionally, there are projects in the code that the code requires to go to the Community Development Director or staff hearing officer for a decision, but the project is controversial or complex enough to warrant review by a higher review authority. The proposed code allows the director or the staff hearing officer to refer a project to the next highest authority without holding a hearing to do so. This eliminates what is effectively a wasted hearing for a referral, allowing the project to go straight to the next highest authority for a decision. This also helps the city comply with state mandated limits on the number of hearings for housing projects. I'm almost through, if I can, okay, thanks. Along with the amendments specific to single-family development, we're proposing a host of amendments that address new state laws, housing element updates that reduce constraints on housing development, and clarifying amendments to the zoning ordinance that streamline processes and simplify the code language. I'll take you through some of the housing element concepts now. By reducing design review triggers, increasing mail notice thresholds, and creating objective standards using design guidelines, this project implements policy H1.4, reducing constraints that impede housing development. It also facilitates special needs housing, program HE3, by streamlining the review process for group homes and employee and farm worker housing, and expanding the zones that allow low barrier navigation centers. Program HE5 is the through line of the whole project, streamlining design review. This is the common thread between the Novak report and the housing element implementation, reducing design review triggers and streamlining public hearings. And lastly, program HE8 facilitates temporary housing in emergency shelters and allows homeowners to live in an ADU or a mobile home on their property if their primary residence is destroyed or damaged. It also eliminates the requirement for discretionary approvals like performance standard permits or conditional use permits for small and large home daycare facilities, and it lowers barriers to permit daycare centers. Overall, we crafted these amendments to help city staff get to yes on more projects more quickly and efficiently, while maintaining aesthetic oversight on development. This project maintains the city's objective of ensuring new development is compatible with the neighborhood and facilitating neighbor participation. It also results in a simpler process, better efficiency, and achieves state requirements related to the housing element and other legislative updates. Your recommendation. And following today's hearing, we are tentatively scheduled for the April 14th, 2026 City Council hearing for introduction. That will, of course, depend on the outcome of this hearing. Adoption would be on April 28th, and the ordinance would be in effect on May 28th. And before I conclude quickly, I wanted to just point out we left some handouts with you. These are proposed rewrites addressing some of the public comment regarding porches. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I'd like to open it up to my colleagues if they have any questions for city staff. Councilmember Sneddon, or sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. I'll save the comments, but I so appreciate the clarity, and also I'm creating the standards from guidelines, and we've talked about this so many times, like if these are guidelines and then they're not enforceable, then why are we able to appeal them? So my question, and I think you explained this really well in our briefing, but if you could really explain at what decision points an appeal could be made and who the appeal would go to and sort of what that chain is. And that's really for the public to understand, like if they have an issue with something, at what point is their meeting to really be able to make a statement or to bring something up?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon. Administrative approvals performed by the Community Development Director are not appealable. Those are considered final decisions. The projects that are appealable would be the consent level and full board level projects at SFDB. And specifically, the action that is appealable would be project design approval. Anyone who participated either orally or in writing in the project design approval hearing can appeal. They have standing. And the appeal would go to Planning Commission.
And through the chair, if I may add, that we always encourage people to participate as early as possible. So one of the things we didn't really talk too much about, but it's shown on the slide, is concept review, and that the majority of projects go through concept review. And if a mailed notice is required, you have to do a mailed notice at concept review, a mailed notice at project design approval. So you get neighbors within 300 feet of projects get 2 mailed notices. And so that gives them the opportunity to see the project at its earliest state when it's still forming. So that is a key moment for people to participate, highly recommend. And then it's also key to participate at project design approval, because that's really the substantive decision, and when the mass, bulk, and the scale are ultimately approved or denied by the single-family design board. So we give people multiple chances, and when we crafted the mailed noticing requirements, you see not too much change, because we think our mailed noticing requirements are pretty spot on, in that we get people to come out for the things that are most important, that we think would be, that give people the most concern. So there are only some slight changes to the mail noticing requirements, but ultimately, we feel like we try to get people out as soon as possible.
Okay. And if somebody hasn't commented or written in, even though they've gotten mailed notices, then they'd have no standing. So a question I have is, like, when do story polls go up? And maybe somebody doesn't realize something is an issue until they see the story polls. At what point does that happen, and at what point can they still have an influence?
In the proposed SFDB guidelines, story polls would have to be installed a minimum of 7 days prior to the decision hearing. The updated guidelines propose that story polls would only be required for projects requesting what is now an FAR modification, otherwise, exceeding the 100% allowable FAR. That's a pretty high bar, but it is also something that SFDB has said is very important, is to keep projects, below 100% and more toward 85%, which is the sweet spot. So, 7 days prior to the hearing date, and staff would be, that would be also noted in public hearings, I believe, prior to the story polls going up, is the intention to put them up. And, there would be communication prior to that 7 days as well.
Okay. And then it's concept review is when you really see what that balcony looks like or what an issue might be. And someone who doesn't comment at that concept review could still comment at project design approval, but project design approval, if you could clarify for me, is that just confirming that whatever was in concept review is actually what's before the board, or are there more changes that happen in the project design approval stage?
There could be changes that happen between concept and project design approval, and ideally those changes would reflect whatever the board's comments were at concept. Mm-hmm. The idea behind concept review is to get projects in early for, an early look at overall site planning, overall size, bulk, and mass, things like neighborhood context, and that's when you really get the board's first look and impression of the project. Mm-hmm. Project design approval is the approval point. So that's where the plans should be fleshed out. They should show everything that the applicant's requesting or proposing, and it should include things like color and material details. It should include visual aids, and that's really the key point at which folks will have the most information about a project.
Okay.
And may I add to that? So one thing that is different historically is that we can't mandate concept review. Most people take us up on it. Most people want to get that early input, the designers, architects, that helps them refine their design. It helps them get that early feedback from neighbors, and then it kind of gives them insight of, is the board going to approve this? Are they going to like this? Are they going to, how close am I to meeting those neighborhood compatibility findings? So generally, most people go for concept review. But they could tell us, no, I don't want to go. I am just going to submit for project design approval. And so behind the scenes, when an applicant submits, we're doing our our land development team is reviewing it to make sure, or looking at to determine if it's if the application's complete. And once we deem it complete, we have our state permit streamlining act dictates that there needs to be a decision within 90 days. So if someone doesn't go to concept review and they say, I'm just going straight for project design approval, and they've been deemed complete, and it's the first time that the board's seen it, it may get continued, but it would need to be continued to a date certain, and we need to always be aware of our permit streamlining deadline. So it just means that they could kick the can, or that SFDB might not have enough information, or they might not get to the point where they can make all those findings, and in that situation, then they could deny the project. So they're not, their hand isn't, they have options to approve a project, deny a project, because they can't make all the findings, or approve with some conditions related to the aesthetics. So, but generally, we don't see that come up. Most people go through the optional concept review and move through the process that way.
Thank you. And so then that second hearing, the way it used to be, where it was just to see if everything was in compliance of what was approved, the plan, that's now a staff decision. Staff can look through and see, does this substantially conform to what was approved in the design approval? Is that?
That's correct. Final approval would be performed by staff at the building permit phase, and yes.
And if I also may add that what that means for project design approval, it's reorienting both applicants, neighbors, and the single-family design board, that they're going to have to see more information. We're expecting more information at that project design approval stage. So if you look on this slide, the color and material details, the applicants are going to need more of those details up front, because we feel like that's better process to streamline, not having the second appealable hearing at final, but just requiring some more information up front, and then being able to green light for the building permit. So that's the way we're doing it. It's not that we expect more information so that it's clear as to the aesthetics, the design, and generally, we're a different city, because a lot of other cities don't even have a single-family design board. So it's one way that we can still, again, have aesthetic oversight within reason, and have an appropriate amount of information for the board to be able to make a decision.
Great. And then just one more question about that. If something comes in, terrible concept, never going to pass, comments are made, they go back, they come back to the project design approval, the board says, this is terrible concept, we don't agree with this, it doesn't, not good neighbor guidelines or anything. Then the clock starts, or when it starts 90 days from there, or can you just deny it and then it starts over again, the clock? Or what happens then if somebody, an applicant, we want to assume everybody's trying to be the best neighbors they can be and make the most compatible project. In general, that's what people do. But what is the risk in gaming the system of sort of ignoring input, ignoring comments, and then just pushing through on a timeline? What are our buffers for that?
Thank you. So it really has to do with making a decision. So, and as I mentioned, the decision could be approve, deny, or approve with conditions. And so if someone is just blatantly not listening or not following through or making any changes, and they're like, this is my project, and the board is not obligated to approve it, and they would just deny it, and we would request that they're very specific in what findings of the the neighborhood compatibility findings can they not make and why? And so it paints a clear picture because it's likely that that applicant would then appeal that to the planning commission. Or alternatively, if they happen to approve it, even though that's not really, it doesn't make sense why they would approve something that they couldn't make findings for, but then anybody has the ability to appeal that decision, should they not agree with it.
And then
And that stops that permit stream. A denial also stops the permit streamlining application.
And starts it back over again.
It stops the project. So then you have to follow due process and appeal it if you want to.
Thank you. And then I also really appreciate the hillside updates. If you could just sort of summarize what are the main updates to that, again, so that the public is aware.
The hillside findings? Yeah. Let me find that slide. Essentially, I'll show it in a second here, but what we're doing is focusing the findings on what's actually in SFDB's purview. Currently, and I wish I had the existing findings on a slide here, but they really reference a lot of things like, at least for the grading and vegetation removal findings, siltation, water quality, and things like that that really aren't part of SFDB's expertise. So this really hones in on what the SFDB is charged with looking at, which is blending with the natural appearance of the ridgeline or hillside and doesn't significantly affect topography on a site.
And I'd like to add to that, through the chair, that this was a major request of our single-family design board. They feel very uncomfortable making health and safety findings, and these things are naturally addressed through the entitlement process, through our environmental review, as well as in the building permit stage, that a lot of the best practices or management or water flow, if some water's on one property and it's flowing onto a neighbor's property, that's through the building permit stage and inspections and management of building permits. So we feel comfortable making these alterations because there are two bookends to addressing the neighbor concerns.
Thank you, because that's a big one that has come up in appeals on that. And then is the Fire Board of Appeals, are they still in the loop somehow? It used to be that if you did grading over 14% slope and then it was somehow contested, that it would go there for appeal. Is there still an appeal process for that or no?
So building permits may be appealed, and that is through the Board of Appeals, and there's still, that process remains the same.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just got a couple of questions. So this is always the working document to me. You guys are going to play with the ordinances, but this should be, if I was doing this for a living, what I would be looking at. I'm just wondering, you've heard this from me before, but I'm just wondering on whether sticking points for ongoing things or the changes we're making, like FARs, fences and walls, hedges, optional parking, why we're not incorporating pictures or diagrams into this, why we're not turning it into more something like the, whatever that phone book's called for creeks. You know what I mean? It's okay that literally says, well, here's what a low-impact development could look like in this type of setting, that kind of shows visuals. Why do we shy away from photos in documents like this? Not photos, diagrams, whatever you want to call them. Like in some of your presentation today, like an example of this, or an example of a wall that's automatically possible over the counter, but you're going to explain it in words instead of an example.
That's a great question, Councilmember Jordan. And
Time and money is the answer. I know that is, but
I will say we did base a lot of our proposed code standards on existing design guidelines that are in the single-family residence design guidelines, which has a lot of really wonderful imagery.
okay.
So we would still be pointing people to those guidelines because those really those stand. Those are
There's
really good.
another document that's just not part of this
Yes.
today.
I know there are a few images in the ordinance here and there that are new. And with regard to the guidelines, which isn't in ordinance committee purview, but I'll just say that those are really supposed to be a technical document that staff like, to have be mostly in writing, as opposed to having lots of extra supplemental pictures. We want to just be able to kind of look through the text and be able to make decisions.
And then examples like anything we've talked about, and particularly the new substantial conformance criteria, there's still a pathway if you want to deviate from that, right? This just gives you the quick pathway on a way through the process, but if I wanted a fence other than your example on there, or if I wanted a 12-foot hedge, or I couldn't, it just means I'm not going to go to the design board or any other stop that involves that if I do it the way we've spelled it out. But there is always still another pathway to bring something that doesn't qualify, right? We're not saying people can't do this. We're just saying you can do this easier or you can do it the same old hard way, correct?
We're saying you can do this if you do X, Y, Z. If you propose X, Y, and Z options, we can approve you ministerially. With regard to the substantial conformance criteria, if you don't meet one of these criteria, for whatever reason, you'd have to propose a new application or just keep your design the same that was approved for project design approval. But yes, there is a way to propose something new and, try a different route.
And then
Councilmember Jordan, may I also just share that what we want to avoid generally is we don't want to have these situations where during the building permit revision process where people start adding a lot to their scope. Because we get that now, and we're always teetering on, do we admin this? Does it meet our existing criteria? We're going to have to send this back for review after final at consent or full board. We'd like people to kind of stay in their lanes, and that doesn't mean things change. You get to building permit, your money, you're reassessing everything. We acknowledge there are changes. So this still provides, a little bit of flexibility, but trying to maintain the substantial conformance criteria that really matters in the project design approval realm and what matters to neighbors and what gets people caught up on. I don't agree with this project based on these areas, but we want to kind of draw a line and say, if you're trying to add a bunch of other stuff or a bunch of site work, then you need to submit a new planning application. Or you need to look at our code and have a separate building permit if it doesn't trigger design review. So that just kind of, I would say, protects our hearing process in the single-family design board review and neighbors' input, and it also protects staff from not having, saying, okay, this is where we draw the line. This is actually a new application. This goes beyond the scope.
perfect. And then love the work on, the multiple appeals on one pathway. And have you given any thought, or how do we also resolve that when I was just at a site visit this morning, so that's getting a coastal development permit, then it's going to come before single-family design board, so you're going to end up potentially having a serial appealer get more than one shot at it. Is there any way that you can work on or see happening that when it's going through multiple approval processes, in this case planning commission and single-family design board, that still there's a point in time where a person only gets one shot at the appeal somewhere along that line? Or is it just too difficult? I know a coastal development permit is probably a bad example because that's probably appealable to the coastal commission too, right? So you have to hit that separately. But there's probably other ones out there that are running through something else and something else. And can we work on grabbing those together also?
Well, if I may, our current ordinance doesn't preclude you from having project design approval and final approval at the same hearing.
Okay.
And we often recommend that if we know we're getting close to a hearing limit maximum, or say, hey, if you just provide these extra details, sometimes it's the stormwater management and having some more final details that the homeowners don't want to spend a lot of money up front to kind of build that in. But if they've gotten good comments at concept and it's generally a supportable project, then we would just say, hey, you need to submit some extra information up front and some, final approval details, but we can do that now and just kind of combine that. So that it would be appeal of both project design approval and final approval.
Okay.
And
I'll do some more thinking about that on
Councilmember Jordan, just to add.
other examples, I guess.
Yes, to add on to that, our code does allow us to group appeal. So for example, if we anticipate that the design review approval will also be approved, we can make sure that that hearing happens before it goes to council so
Okay.
that those appeals can go together. That doesn't work for single family because their appeals go to planning commission
Right.
rather than city council. So we do it when we can, but the example you gave, the appeal of the coastal development permit would go to city council. Then they would move on to design review. That appeal would
Yep.
go back to planning commission, but with the knowledge of the decision that city council
Yeah,
had
thanks.
made.
Just wishing, right? And then so I've watched too much of everything, right, in my life, but, what can we do to help with the burden of, state law and timelines or number of hearings? My personal reflection on that is people struggle not to deny. And it seems like, is there a strategy that we can help with our boards and commissions to say, you don't have to sit here and struggle over this, like I have to approve this because the time's running out. I can just deny it and make it somebody else's problem, but that will solve the problem, because I think just, my experience in watching is people want to not deny and want to get to a decision, and most often or not, probably make a decision they wouldn't make in any, if they didn't have that timeline coming up, that they make a decision they wouldn't make normally. And is there something we can do internally to help with education on that I think, obviously, from a question, that I think it's not readily known that you can deny, and that stops your liability with the state legislation. And you just go to an appeal, and those people get to say yes or no, and if the project doesn't like it, they can sue us and, whatever. But I think, do you see the same thing happening? I know you've done this a long time with single-family design board, but I see other design boards struggling with that also.
Councilmember Jordan, if I may,
Yes,
excuse
ma'am.
me. So there's a difference between the single-family design board's ability to deny a project and what we see with ABR and HLC, and that's because of the Housing Accountability Act. So the ABR and HLC struggle more because they can only deny the project if there's health and safety impacts that can't be mitigated. That's not the case with single-family design board, and so that could be a mind shift. The Housing Accountability Act doesn't apply to single-family, so we can use more discretionary, subjective findings to deny a project.
Okay. So maybe that's some work to do. And then.
And Councilmember Jordan, if I could also supplement that a little bit, I think to answer your question about how we, address maybe the uncomfortability of denying projects, that's training. That's just training the boards and commissions about what their purview is, what's within their power, and, when it is, appropriate to deny a project because they don't think the findings can be met. So
Okay.
we did a training like that in summer 2023 for the SFDB. And as we roll out this project, we'll be doing more trainings with them.
And I don't like to call out individual homeowners, but I think that there are projects we can learn from. And I think as we look at there are some now that I think that is too big for this neighborhood, and that is not something that the neighborhood wants to see, that council wants to see, or, that generally, that the planning, we heard from the planning commission that they didn't seem comfortable with the decision. And so I think we need to look back, even going as far back to when the creation of the single-family design board, which is really to mitigate the McMansionization that was happening along Shoreline, to say that there are some good examples of projects that we as a community think are just too big. And let's kind of remember those cases and think back of like, if we're looking at new ones that come before us, let's, I think what we heard from appellants when we had our focus group and we've talked to neighbors, that they didn't want something to set a precedent. Like if that new big one is approved, then that gives the permission to let the entire neighborhood go that way. And I think we need to learn from those mistakes and kind of coach our chairs, and even as a liaison of like what we think is acceptable. So I think that's kind of the way that I've learned to say that one, that wouldn't fly, and I don't think that should fly, and I don't want that to set a precedent.
Yep, I hate that word, but because those precedents don't exist, but as I tell everybody every time, but then again, once they've grown like locusts, then they are a de facto precedent without being a precedent, because they're normal, so.
And that's what's so interesting about Santa Barbara is that most of the residences really, World War II housing that was all single story, and then then you started seeing second story additions, and that was really the major thing. And now that's really the norm in a bunch of neighborhoods. And now it's like maximizing your development, we see. So I think just kind of right sizing, and there are some projects that aren't right sized.
Yep, and then are we talking about porches today? Is that why this handout's in front of us?
We certainly could. Councilmember Jordan, I believe we should open public comment as well.
So you want a question on that, though, okay.
Up to the committee.
The lady behind you is nodding, so I'll
Yes.
just go ahead. So I'll answer my own question, and then you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but what's our concern generally with porches anyhow? I would anticipate that it's like space that we allow, and then we look away, and then we look back, and all of a sudden it's become enclosed because it was usable space, it's already got a floor, it's already got a covering, and then we go away and we come back and somebody's put up 3 walls and it's pure habitable space, square footage. Is that our issue, or why do we worry about, they could run the width of the building, but they can only be 6 feet. Why can't they be 8 feet? Why can't they be 10 feet if there's still open yard? What's the fascination with this?
The main thing is just the massing and adding extra size, bulk to the front of your property.
Okay.
I will note that in order to comply with the zoning code, your porch can't be enclosed, and it's not considered floor area. So as long as it remains unenclosed, it's considered a porch. But even though it is not floor area and it's not an addition, the roof massing does add bulk toward the street. So that's why we're proposing some kind of a route to get a ministerial approval for adding a porch to a residence that doesn't have a
And then,
porch.
like everything else, if you don't qualify for the ministerial, you could come make your case at the design board, right? No? There is a preclusion
to
from
write that
doing
in,
anything else other than the ministerial?
We would need to edit that because currently the way it's drafted, it would actually go to the staff hearing officer for modification.
Okay.
So
Well, that's a pathway.
It's a pathway.
It's a
Yeah, so
pathway.
there's always a pathway. I guess that's my question.
We always, yes, we're always trying to create a pathway, and I think it's trying to make an appropriate pathway.
Right.
So I think a modification when we might be able to get there either ministerially through criteria or design or, having a hearing. I think that's kind of
Okay.
the navigation of it. And I would also add that neighborhood pattern is also an important measure for the appropriateness of front porches. We don't want something that juts all the way out to the front lot line and then just looks like this awkward if you're walking down the street. most times people are just trying to get something that looks aesthetically pleasing. That's the
Okay.
goal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. I had a follow-up question that I remembered, just relating to fire issues and materials. I think it's come up before, like if a certain material, roofing material or other material is better for either fire resilience or we've had some cases where fire insurance will only cover it if it's a certain material kind of thing. How does that play into this? If it could it be automatically that if something is more fire resilient, it's approvable, or is it then they might have to go through a different process to get approved for a more fire resilient material, or window treatment, or double pane windows, or something like that? If you could address that.
Thank you, Councilmember Snowden. I believe it's the building code, the building and fire code, requires high fire hazard area compatible or consistent materials. So if you are in one of those high fire areas, then you do have to have certain building elements that meet those requirements. And where design review is involved, we're proposing some portions of the guidelines that include guidance on high fire eligible materials and essentially just introducing more flexibility to administratively approve them. I think the wording is something like, if you're in a high fire area and you're proposing something that's, maybe a little bit different than your neighborhood, but is high fire, like, a standing seam metal roof, then staff will have a little bit more leeway to administratively approve that.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So I just have one question. How can using AI help further streamline these projects?
Great question.
If I may jump in to Councilmember Jordan's idea of having good visuals and examples, I think that's one where AI can step in. And if there are more kind of visual explanation, because our ordinance is very text heavy, and that's kind of the nature of ordinances, but I think that we can use tools to kind of visually say, this is kind of the intention we're getting at, or here's an example of how you might be able to skip design review entirely, and just if you design like this or using these materials, then you can just go straight to building permit. So I think the visual aspect is one, the communication that we have with the public and our applicants and homeowners, I think could be very powerful.
Sorry. So as of now, are you aware of being able to implement AI to try to streamline this?
Councilmember Gutierrez, right now, we don't have a citywide sort of policy on use of AI. We are in the process of working through with our IT department a pilot program to use Microsoft Copilot. There is a smaller user group that is focused on that, and then from there, we will see, once we've created governance structures and policies for AI within the organization, how do we expand usage beyond that. But at this point, we don't really want to just kind of one-off start implementing AI solutions throughout the city without having a comprehensive sort of governance structure for it that's led through my office with IT.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, unless my colleagues have any other questions, I'll open it to public comment. We have one public speaker, Timothy Bolton. Go ahead.
Honorable Chair and members of the Ordinance Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this item today. My name is Timothy Bolton, and I am here solely representing myself as a property owner taking vacation time to be here. First off, I just want to say thank you for council and showing your leadership to streamline some of our permitting processes, as well as for Mr. Hamilton Roll for all of his work to get us to this place and accomplish just that. The reason I'm here is because of what's proposed for front porches, which is the subject of my submitted comment letter. In short, I encourage the committee to add more flexibility by revising the 16-foot width limit to match the porches that I see in my neighborhood. Like many folks who have aging homes, I am at a juncture where it needs substantial work. after existing in this world for nearly 80 years. As part of that, I hope to put in a new porch to improve my home's architectural character, to better integrate it in with the surrounding neighborhood fabric, and provide a small space to gather and chat with my neighbors. Because of where my front door and living room windows are located, a functional porch really is in the realm of about 6 foot deep by 20 to 22 feet wide. I've spent considerable time and effort working with my architect to try and find a way to make a narrow porch work, but it just doesn't based on how the roof attaches to the structure and where the columns would land in front of the windows. This is a challenge that many folks face with existing homes besides just me. As staff mentioned, the only way for me to permit that functional porch today is by getting a zoning modification. I've done that process once before, and it cost me $20,000 and took an additional 6 months to my entitlement process for my accessory dwelling unit project. That type of cost and delay is a major hardship for a porch that's a very minor architectural element, and quite frankly, I'm trying to build something that's very similar to my next door neighbor and is smaller than my neighbor who's catty corner who has a porch that extends the full width of his building. In my comment letter, I've included 3 potential options that could help address this issue. My recommendation is to provide our design community the most flexibility by allowing them to build a porch that's the full width of the building while retaining the existing 6-foot depth limit. There are lots of porches like this in my neighborhood, so the outcomes would blend right in. If that's too much flexibility, then I recommend increasing the maximum width to 25 feet, which is about half the typical 50-foot wide parcel that exists in my neighborhood. This would result in less massing in the setback than what is proposed by staff, and again, would result in compatible outcomes. And finally, if there is this need currently proposed by staff, it's to increase the depth to 10 feet. I'm not sure that fits with the fabric of my neighborhood where we have 15-foot front setbacks, but if there is that need, then I suggest removing the width entirely and instead converting that to a square footage limit in a way that would still allow the 10-foot by 16-foot porch envisioned by staff while allowing additional flexibility for those of us who want narrower and more modest porches. Thank you for your time and consideration. Please help our community build better porches with less process.
Thank you. Is there any online speakers?
Chair Gutierrez, there's no further comment in person or online.
Okay. I'd like to open it to my colleagues to give their comments or make a motion. Councilmember Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, great work output project. I'm sorry it took 3 years, but I guess one of my, other than just burdening you, like, oh, let's start over and work on the next 3 years, it would just seem like, you know, from when you started to where you got output, to where you thought about it, to where you did it, probably other things have changed. Obviously, porches, just to pick on one. Other things have come up along the way that weren't thought of. And I think this is indicative of anything in a bureaucracy, is how to find a way in this day and time to take smaller bites more often. Just recognizing that it's not my original house, post-World War II, small little place anymore, and life has changed in so many ways. You know, grandkids, kids, all living together. But it's just, and other things are. Mom and dad could be moving in with somebody, and they need access. They'd like to sit on a porch. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that just changes in life so much faster than it did in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And we could say, oh, that's really challenging, but I think a more correct answer would be how do we rise to that challenge of addressing those demographic or societal or use changes while still hanging on to, as hard as we can, the look and feel of Santa Barbara, however one describes that. But so it would be nice to see like an accumulation over a year of ongoing repetitive approvals at Single Family Design Board, just anywhere. But we're talking about the Single Family Design Board, and just have a structured review process that waits a year, loads those up, and does a quicker, just a small bite improvement on ones that are agreeable. You know, it comes back through here, it comes back through wherever. but rather than a large effort that takes 3 years. I mean, I get it, there's a lot of good stuff in this, but there you could, in a year, just do less good stuff and just incrementally make those improvements. So quicker, more nimble, of the same thing you've done. And I think the work so far has been wonderful. And I'd just like to emphasize that, you had those project goals, but, it's not just, I know, just kind of waiting to hear people react at council, wondering at council that, the real goal is not reducing the number of single-family development projects subject to design review. The real goal is to remove those projects that are demonstratively repetitive approvals without a problem in the neighborhood over a course of time and get them out of there. They're just a resource suck, and they've done nothing to hurt the neighborhood or generate any type of neighborhood response that was negative. Those are the goals, and that frees the burden on us as a city. It also frees the burden on the homeowner to be able to just move forward and not be put in a project where I got to do this, but I know it's going to be approved and whatever. It's a window replacement in the coastal development permit, right? My favorite example of all time, right? And so I think that, if you wanted to stick another goal in there, I think you could help with that goal too, that these are demonstrated examples of repetitive over and over approvals that that had zero or so minimal neighborhood objections that there's no reason to include these as we have historically. Love most everything. I think I loved everything you've talked about. Rise Up, love the open yard stuff, love the garage flexibility with the examples you gave, whether it's to a guest house or a playhouse or a gym out in your yard. I think these are improvements that reflect modern day and don't reflect 75 years ago when somebody just had a shed out back and it was just a shed out back. So love that. Really like the changes in the substantial conformance criteria. I think that takes a huge burden off of the struggles with normal people trying to make normal decisions on the ground in what up till now has probably been just hard to do, and that just helps. And again, the changes there in square footage or grading are again examples of things that have been demonstrated over time to have no people getting the pitchforks out and storming City Hall on. And why are they part of that? Why are they part of that gauntlet that a project has to run? And then I'll just make another request for as many times as we can to include visuals in whatever setting we can, in handouts or whatever. I think a goal should be for for a small project that meets criteria to not have to, just to make it the homeowner and his contractor, and not have to involve an architect slogging through volumes of pages of words and or a planner to walk you through the process. That we want to facilitate people being able to make simple, acceptable improvements as easily as possible, which, you could probably make the case that has not been our history, looking back over decades and decades, but that should be our goal, I think. Let's see, I forgot on my what I love thing too, the FARs, the fences and walls, the hedges, the optional parking, that type of, all those improvements as part of this. Whether they're demonstrated or not by by past approvals that just happen just automatically almost. I think we should always be on the lookout for stuff that's on the ground already, that's working in the neighborhood, and nobody is complaining about. So if it's integrated into the neighborhood already, and people are living with it and getting along together, but it's something on paper that we don't allow, that should be subject to discussion, not subject to automatic move this into a non-discretionary approval, but it should be telling us that these are common uses out there in the hood, modern families, and so I think we should have the goal of looking for those opportunities to recognize that. You know, porches may very well be one of those. Even your examples of, oh, we wouldn't want that if that's different from the rest of a block. I don't know. I kind of like prioritizing outdoor living rather than just saying you can't have a porch because we're only going to make it so big, and nobody else on the street has anything other than a stoop, you know, a walk-up stoop. What a great, I'm sure I could find a goal somewhere, but what a great goal to prioritize outdoor living in a residential setting where people are actually spending times outdoor in front of their house and greeting people walking by, and people are greeting them walking by, and creating a neighborhood rather than, well, all the houses were already built this way and that should be how they should always look. So I don't really have any advice on how we go forward on that. So that's what you're going to say. Well, what are you saying? I don't know what I'm saying other than I think we should be open to the idea of incorporating outdoor space as part of a living ingredient wherever we can. Go ahead, I'll let you ask the question I can't answer.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, I think we all very much support a porch idea, and I was just saying in terms of neighborhood patterns that you just don't want to have some weird appendage. You just don't want it too big, but having a porch is lovely. So I just want to, I'm total agreement.
If you pick the street in my neighborhood and nobody, I wish I had a big porch. I wish that I took my front door and my porch and put an overhang over it and put some more pavement out there so that you could literally have a round table that sat 6 or 8 people, and in the evening you could dine out there and wave at your neighbors and that kind of thing. And I just can't imagine how difficult that would be to, do it in the setback, worry about your open yard, oh, it's got a cover on it, it's attached to the house, that kind of thing. I just think there's some thinking there that could be done on what the future of as these houses get built bigger, they start to hold more people, they start to hold multi-generations, triple generations in some cases. They become so much more than they were before, when they were a small little post-World War II house and people just did stuff other places, or they were able to go to a park, or they were able to play in the street. And I just see, this is way too long just to talk about porches, but I just see this as an example of the type of visioning we should have on what single-family residences would look like in the future and how they integrate into the neighborhood together with each other. So it's big picture, crazy thinking that I don't really have go forth and how to do this kind of thing, but it's just, I hate to see porches were singled out as something, oh, we could do better in that, okay, let's do a little better, but wow, could we even do better on incorporating what you've suggested into something a little more comprehensive that gives more flexibility and recognizes that that is an integral connection to both the people that live there and to those that are around them in the neighborhood. And I don't see a downsize into somehow trying to improve that dynamic. And those are my comments. Otherwise, this is ready to go. I think it's a great work product, and I know it's been a long 3 years, and I really think you guys have done a really good job pulling out the things that matter, and we'll have a quick improvement. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. So I'll start with the porches and then go to the other comments too. So I love porches, and I would actually prioritize them over balconies. Balconies, you're looking down on a neighbor's yard, you're maybe looking into their windows, it separates you from the rest of community. And I think on the same, for the same reasons that we don't like hedges to be too high or fences to be high, I think porches achieve that same thing of bringing community together, and even wraparound porches or different ways. And I'm imagining that there's some, and I don't know, but I think that you might look into whether there's some architectural guideline for if the roof pitch is this amount or your setback is this amount, then an acceptable square footage of porch is something. And then, of course, it matters, does it have, big colonnades attached to it, or is it, have a metal roof or green corrugated roof, or what, those types of things. So maybe the attention is more into materials or presentation than to actual size, as long as it's in that setback. And especially when we're talking about, and I love the idea of the landscaped setback and not having it be a paved over parking area. But I think porches in a whole neighborhood, and maybe you are the first one, so maybe there isn't a precedent for it. But and some neighborhoods too are strange, like some of the houses are much further setback than other houses that are much closer to the front. And so it isn't really one size fits all the way through. So, if a neighborhood's all craftsman and it's all uniform and you're in a certain design district, then maybe that's more limiting in that specific design district of what it looks like. But I love porches, and I think it, along the lines of what we're allowing in flexibility for what's happening with your parking space now inside a garage, I think it's sort of along those same lines of inviting more community, actually, on porches. So I'll just leave that at that. And I don't know what that would be, but maybe some more flexible standard on that. And then, yeah. And then just in general, oh my gosh, thank you. How many times appeals have come, or we've talked about the guidelines versus standards, and this really addresses that, and in a big way. So really, thank you, Mr. Hamilton-Roll and Ms. Cookinda and team, for really tackling this. It's been, for years, such an issue over and over, and I feel like this is really responsive to that. So creating standards from guidelines, and then still allowing the flexibility if somebody wants to do something different, is perfect, because then you have the standard, you want to do it easy, you do it this way. If you want to do something outside of this, there's a process, there's a route, and I love that. So I really appreciate the attention to the balcony setbacks, and because that is continually, like to Councilmember Jordan's point of what we keep repeatedly hear from, it's those balconies more than anything else that have been an issue, that have come when it used to appeal to council. That just seemed to be something that came up over and over as good neighbor guidelines. I really appreciate the hillside updates. Any updates that allow for more fire resilience also, so I'm really appreciating that. And then the optional covered parking, again, to Councilmember Jordan's points as well, like the more modern way of living, some of those, especially in more historic buildings, those small garages are made for carriages. And I just remember I don't know, maybe it was 6 or 7 years ago, and there was a neighbor up on the hillside who kept getting cited because she wasn't parking her car in her garage, and it was a Prius, but it did not fit in the garage that was part of her historic building. And she could fit it in the driveway, but a neighbor just continually had a problem with that. And I love that this does allow for, right? You can park in your driveway. Okay, phew, because, right? And then also what we've heard over and over at council, I'm just sort of pointing out how responsive this has been to things we've heard. When people didn't want to have to completely update their garage to have a kitchen, a bathroom, all these other things, when really all they wanted was just a little additional space with a couch in it, or, a fold-out bed for now and then. So this really addresses that in a big way that I appreciate. And again, we have more people, more generations than aging in place, or expanding sizes within the same footprint, and people not moving around as much. And so I think this allows for that flexibility in a more modern way without completely destroying, what makes Santa Barbara aesthetically beautiful. I appreciate the emergency permit process, being the forethought of that, recognizing that does happen and causes a lot of delay. So I appreciate that. And I really appreciated Councilmember Jordan's comments about the sort of retraining of SFDB or the purview, or, since this is an aesthetic board and it was made in response to McMansionization, certainly they can comment on size, bulk, and scale not fitting a neighborhood. So I think that's really important to emphasize with them. And also much gratitude to them for the work that they do, and much gratitude for them going through these guideline updates and, well, not guideline updates, but streamlining updates, and they were in support of these changes. So thank you to you for working with the SFDB to, what could make this whole process better. And I'm sure we'll hear back some things that could be changed or updated, but the massive changing in the framework of this to be able to make the first efforts and changes, then it'll be adjustments for sure. But I really, really appreciate the work here. It's a long time coming, and it's really thorough. So appreciate that. And I'm happy to support this moving forward too.
All right. Well, with that being said, I will just like to open it to my colleagues to make a motion.
So I'll move that we forward this to council. If you'd like to do some more work on the porches before we do, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I just think you could take that as a starting point and either make changes or not make changes, but maybe address some of the comments you heard when it gets to council. That'd be my only comment on the motion, on what that motion would include. Does that work?
And I would second it with those comments. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second. May we have a vote, please?
Motion moved by Committee Member Jordan, seconded by Committee Member Sneddon, that the Ordinance Committee review and recommend that City Council approves the ordinance amendments to Titles 30, 25, and 22 related to single-family streamlining project, determine the proposed ordinance amendments are consistent with the general plan, and determine that the proposed ordinance amendments are categorically exempt from California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA, under Class 5, Guidelines Section 15305, minor alterations in land use limitations, and to include the comments mentioned by Councilmember Jordan. Are we ready? There was a reason, yeah.
All right.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and vote.
May we have the vote? Yes. Okay, that passes unanimously. All right. Well, with that being said, I wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day, and I call this meeting adjourned.
portano sei